Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 15. This is Katie's Psychic Snaps. And today we have with us our dear friend, Katie.
And I just want to say a little bit about Katie before I let Katie introduce herself. Katie's meant so much to our lives, both just as a friend, a person, a fellow spiritual explorer. So many ways. We talk to her quite often, and it fills our life with joy and happiness to have Katie in our lives. So
Definitely.
Katie gets psychic snaps, and snaps is a word that we learned from her. And it's pretty much like I would describe it, and I'll let her say more, but as intuitive hits,
Mm.
where she's sure that this is coming in as guidance from beyond the ego. And she has assisted our lives greatly with these psychic snaps. So that's why this episode is called Katie's Psychic Snaps. And so, everybody, welcome Katie.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be on an episode with you guys. And I just want to say that the feeling is mutual. You guys mean so much to me. And I'm so grateful for having met you. Brandon and I kind of stumbled into each other's lives and it blossomed from there.
Let's talk about how we met. You want to introduce that story?
Sure. So Brandon and I were both, we both had health issues and we were following Medical Medium and we were both on the same Discord server. And I didn't know Brandon from the Discord server, just somebody posted a thing that said, I'm in school and I need a test subject to do a remote healing on. Is anybody willing to do that?
And so, yeah, I was a year three student at the Barbara Brennan School of Healing, and we had a homework assignment. And my teacher that year was very adamant about finding people who we've never met before. And so I put up a free offer for a practice healing session on Discord. And the first person to respond, we just couldn't get the scheduling right. It's like it wasn't meant to be. And the second person to respond was Katie, and that all happened effortlessly.
I'm so excited that I won that lottery because woohoo!
That's awesome.
So I remember what the homework assignment was back then was spiritual surgery.
So when we met for you to do it, you asked me if I'd had any surgeries in the body or I had any areas that really needed to be healed. So we talked about I had knee surgery a couple times. I can't remember what other surgeries we talked about. And we talked about I had complete reconstructive surgery on my nose. Like I basically had my nose cut off and put back on again because I had cancer. And it wasn't just my nose, it was like the top of my head and behind my ear. And they had to do like massive stuff to my face and head to reconstruct my nose because it was gone. So it was funny because you said, "Oh, do you want to try your knee then?" And I was like, "Oh, actually, I'd sort of like to try the head." So you said, "Okay." So you did your healing, not to like zip past the healing part, but when we were talking afterwards, you said, "Wow, there was so much going on at your head. I kept getting ready to move." And then I was like, "Nope, nope, not done yet."
For those of you who are curious, spiritual surgery is where you hold a certain very particular vibration of the field associated with the fifth chakra, and the fifth level guides enter through the back of my neck, and their energy comes down my arms and hands, and my only job is to stay grounded and hold that vibration, and the guides do all the work through my hands. And this was done remotely over Zoom also,
Yeah. Yep.
but had quite the effect. So
Yeah.
what did you notice in your life after that?
Shortly after that period of time, I started getting into wanting to read tarot cards. And then once I started reading tarot cards, started asking questions and wanting to get into like the psychic stuff. And so I started taking classes for that. And then Brandon and I had ended up with a series of 10 healings after that. And I think we were like halfway through the healings, and you pointed out to me that you had done the work on my head right before all this psychic stuff started opening up for me. So then we kind of connected it back to that. But at the time, I didn't notice that. It took your observation to kind of bring that to my attention. But I do
Yes.
think that that's an accurate observation. Like that was a snap. When you said that, I was like, oh yeah, that's it.
There, first snap of the episode here. And so, we did the spiritual surgery on her head. I restructured her crown chakra at some point. And so there's a lot of work that we did around the part of the human energy field that connects us to the divine. And Barbara always said for people who don't have their crown chakra opening, that when other people are talking about spiritual stuff, they may be totally confused, cannot relate at all, and have no idea what the people are talking about. And so I remember when I met Katie, I asked her kind of what her spiritual background was. And the answer that I remember getting was that she tinkered around with tarot cards way back in college. And at one point, it was scarily accurate. And so she put them away and didn't really touch them since. And that was a long time ago. She lives life as an engineer now. And then following our work together, she took off on these tarot classes and podcasts, followed by classes and groups about how to open up your psychic abilities, and got involved with crystals. And she's always been huge into art, but the art was a big piece of that too. So it was really cool to just be like, wow, what are the odds that after we do this energy work, all this stuff opens up for her? And
Yeah.
to my delight and benefit, as you'll see from her snaps, she's natural. So, anything else for the intro, or should we jump into snap
I
stories?
I don't know. I feel like I want to talk about, you make it sound like I'm completely immersed in this psychic world or something, and that's not really how it is for me, I guess. Like when you say that psychic abilities come naturally or easy, or I don't feel that way at all. So I'm an engineer, like you said. So science, 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 science. And I'm coming to realize that like everything is connected and science isn't quite what we think it is, and I can give some examples of that, but I feel like I was very doubting of these energy sciences, and the thing that sort of got me into it was I was really sick, really sick. We talk about people who are bedbound or can't do things, and I was still walking around, but I was basically walking from like bed to seat. And there were days where my body was so bad that I literally could not get out of bed. But a doctor that I had, she was an MD, but she also dabbles in a lot of the more holistic healing kind of things. She had recommended that I go see this friend of her for a Lyme magnetic protocol, which is they literally put magnets on your body and get rid of crap that's in your body. And they do this muscle testing ahead of time. So my doctor had already done a bunch of testing for me. So I knew what kind of issues or I knew some of the issues I had. So I knew I had like Epstein-Barr, and I knew I had, I don't even know what any other examples are, but I had like, I had like blood work that told me things that I had in my body and things that were wrong with me. So this woman does muscle testing with me, and she's got a list of things that she's testing for, including Lyme disease, which is where the Lyme magnetic protocol comes from. But she was lifting my legs up. She was literally telling me, like, she lift my legs and be like, oh, you have Epstein-Barr. Oh, you have this, you have that. Things that she absolutely could not have known. I live in New Hampshire now. The thing that really got me was she's like, you have Colorado Lyme. How could you have Colorado Lyme? And I was like, oh, I used to live out there.
Wow.
So, I
I've
mean,
never
it was
heard that part
like,
of the story.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it was really, I mean, there were definitely things that I couldn't deny. Like she was coming up with stuff that was factual and verifiable that she absolutely could not have known. And this was all just with muscle testing. So I was like, oh, this is weird. So my husband, who is also science, 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 not into the psychic energy healing, anything like that. I'm telling him what's going on and he's rolling his eyes and like, oh, what is this ridiculous thing that you're doing now? But also being supportive because he knew how sick I was, and also willing for me to try anything that would make me better, right? So I'm going to this Lyme magnetic protocol, and they lay down on the table and they put magnets in various places in your body. And I went like twice a week for like 10 weeks or something like that. I don't know how long it was, but the change in me from the beginning to the end was extraordinary. Like it was
Mhm.
unbelievable. So it made a believer out of both my husband and I. We were like, oh, time to go to the voodoo doctor again.
Nice.
I've been really skeptical and muscle testing hasn't worked for me, but now hearing your
Yeah.
story, I'm like, maybe if I find like a skilled muscle tester,
Well,
I could
Yeah,
yeah,
have an opinion on it.
it seems like she had some intuitive abilities and wasn't just following
definitely.
the art of muscle testing, because I don't think it works for me either.
Mm.
Definitely. But I will say she also used a pendulum. Are you guys familiar with the
Oh,
pendulum? So she
Yeah.
yes.
also used the pendulum. So sometimes she would do muscle testing and sometimes she just whip out the pendulum and then use that to ask yes and no. So I was interested in the pendulum and I was like, what is this pendulum thing? Well, I found I can wield a pendulum like nobody's business. It was very intuitive and very easy for me, and I could get answers very quickly, and they usually worked out pretty well for me. I can't really think of an example where it didn't work out for me.
That's
However, I find the pendulum very limited because it's basically like yes, no, maybe. There's not a whole lot of detail or specificity to what you're doing.
Yeah,
Um,
so I just want to say that's one of the reasons I've always enjoyed the angel board because it's yes, no, and all the sentences and
yeah,
numbers. But we have a pendulum that's actually hanging on one of the angels behind us. It's a beechwood pendulum with the point at the bottom, and we dip it into chakras. Chakras are energy vortexes. And so, depending on if it's swinging like horizontal or vertical or diagonal or circular, but kind of like off to one side or counterclockwise off to one side, all those different directions mean different things. So, in that context, the pendulum is much more than a yes or no. And we
Yeah.
we enjoy using it
yes.
for that purpose.
It's a great tool. Yeah.
So actually, you guys taught me that, and I have used it for that since then. I don't use it so much anymore for asking it questions with like yes, no answers. Like primarily that is what I use the pendulum for.
Uh,
Yeah, so that kind of, I don't know, that kind of made me open to the whole, I don't know. There's otherness to the world, I guess. Not such a science background, but more, I hate separating it out into like science and like energy kind of things. So the example I was going to give you of it's all related is if you look at a lot of the people who are really big in the energy healing and who have made phenomenal contributions to that, Barbara Brennan is the example that comes to mind. She was a physicist, right?
Mhm.
Like,
yeah, I worked for NASA. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
yes. I think that there's too much division between this is science and this is, I don't even know what to call the non-science stuff, right? Like people call it like woo-woo stuff or whatever you want to call it. I think it's all related and intertwined. There's no separation.
Yeah,
But
absolutely
I didn't know
not.
that.
I
Yeah.
call it woo woo in the muggle world, but in this and listening to you, I'm thinking it's science and the not yet peer reviewed science.
There you go. That's exactly right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nassim Haramein's another famous physicist who's a spiritual guy too. He tries to, well, he does explain most of spirituality through physics.
Yeah.
So the two do go hand in hand. Most people probably don't think they do, but
It all somehow boils down to sacred geometry. I'm not an expert. I just
right.
am
Yeah.
lightly aware of
Right.
all this.
Well, I feel that's the one thing that I regret is I feel like I'm starting my journey so late in life. Like I've wasted so much time. But also at the same time, I also know that that was kind of what was meant to be. Maybe I wasn't ready for it yet, which is probably why I started doing tarot in college and put the cards away and so,
Yeah,
it is what it is and I'm enjoying the journey now, so it's good.
good, good. Yeah, that's honestly a perspective I hear a lot from a lot of people who are just discovering this stuff. And there's just a lot of ways to look at it. One is that it doesn't matter and the world needs it now. And that's why you're coming into
Hmm.
it now.
Yeah.
I like to say there's nothing that's not spiritual. And so
Yeah,
I
definitely.
believe like I've been able to look at my muggle life and see how my muggle life was prepping me, even though I didn't know it, for everything that would come once I
Yeah.
opened up to the woo. And then
Right.
the third perspective I like to hold around this is that this awareness, this work, it's it's soul growth. And so it goes beyond this lifetime. The implications of it are far reaching for the immortal journey that we're on, and you'll carry it with you once you drop your physical body. So there's really, time isn't really a thing outside of this dimension. And
I was just gonna say, I think we're all ready when we're ready, and I think life makes us ready. Certain
Absolutely.
circumstances happen and people come into our lives, chance meetings. It's always seems to be those kinds of stories where things just kind of jumpstart and kick off the spiritual journey for the individual.
but I also love your humility around this and how you made it a point to presence all this, because that's kind of what this podcast is about. My guides tell me to see myself in this higher light. I know, I hear you guys, but at the same time, I'm aware that I'm very much like, my background was just a punk snowboarder kid who just wanted to snowboard every day. And so this podcast and like me and my story, and then having you as a guest here, it's about how, for lack of a better word, normal everyday folks can use and tap into this spiritual guidance to direct
Mhm.
their lives and their soul growth. So I think it's a
Yeah.
great depiction of that.
Yeah.
I think it's nice too to understand that it's kind of accessible to everyone, because as soon as you start diving into this, you start to get a whole new vocabulary that is difficult for the muggle folks, as you call them. Because I know, like, even, talking around the house to my husband, who is totally convinced that I'm a witch now, and he means that in the best possible way. Um, I remember actually even talking to you, like when we first started talking, I was like, "What's a chakra?"
Oh yeah, yeah,
I had
yeah.
I had no idea. There's just this whole other language that goes to it, which you can come up to speed pretty quickly. I haven't been doing this very long.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And when you talk about your husband and his thoughts of you being a witch, it reminds me of one of my favorite stories, if I may tell, about his leg and your healing on it.
sure. Yeah, yeah, sure.
So why don't you tell about his leg, because you can speak to that part better, and
Okay.
I can.
Yeah, so he injured his knee in basketball when he was in high school, and he had an ACL done and like a bunch of other things. And his knee is complete junk. Complete junk. He has been told for at least the last 15 years that he has to have his knee replaced. And he's really been putting it off because he's like, I'm so young. What happens when the replaced knee wears out? Blah, blah, blah. And then we both got COVID. The COVID passed, but we both got joint issues from COVID and they never went away. So his right knee after COVID was swollen like you would not believe. It was probably like 3 times the size of the other knee. It was like one pant leg was loose and one pant leg was like stuck around the knee. And he was really struggling to walk some days. Some days were better than others. So it was like, okay, it's time to have the knee replaced. But then you have to wait for the surgery to happen, right? So he's got this gigantic knee, and I had taken a Reiki class and I was doing Reiki on it. And then Brandon said, well, I can teach you another couple things that we learned in school to do. So he explained some other techniques, and I
Just to
had
clarify, it was the Brennan Healing Science, and I gave her about 2 years of my learning in about 20-30 minutes, and then she was off to the knee.
yes. And so I had been doing Reiki on him and it was fine. He found it very relaxing and he did think it helped a little bit. But then once Brandon gave me this instruction, and actually, I want to interrupt my story here to just say that even before Brandon did this, I have considered Brandon my mentor for this whole psychic woo journey. I don't even know what to call this. I have to come up with a word because I can't deal with it. But Brandon I've always thought of him as my mentor. And even before this Brennan Healing Science tutorial, I have gotten snaps for him to be a teacher. And I keep telling him, I'm like, you're going to be a teacher. I know it. And it's like a consistent snap that I get. But anyway, so he spent like
And I
a
know
half
it's
an
gonna come true, because I don't question Katie's snaps ever.
Right.
Um, so after him talking to me for 30 minutes, I started implementing what he taught me on my husband's knee, and the results were so dramatic. Like, if you took a tape measure and you went around his knee and it was like 25 inches around, after I worked on him for an hour, it would be like 15. It was like half the size that it was before, and the swelling would go down, and it was like hot and angry and red, and like all of that went down. So one time before I did a healing on him, I took a picture of his knee, and then I took a picture immediately afterwards because I wanted to show someone, like Evil and I was like, this is unbelievable, right?
Yes.
So the picture that I took wasn't actually as significant as some of the times when I did it, but it was significant enough that you could tell the difference in
Oh,
the
yeah.
swelling. And that was after 1 hour of energy healing.
It
For those
makes
of
me
you who
wonder.
don't know what energy healing is, it's not like massage or anything. It's like, yeah, hover your hands over.
Yeah, like the lightest touch, but I saw the pictures she took, and it makes me wonder what the other sessions looked like because my mind was
Yes.
blown. We saw him, right?
Yeah, we were so mind blown that we asked if we could share it with the pictures with our class chat, and people were just like, "Oh my God." And so, working with intention with your hands is all Katie did.
Well, and very specifically with this
Right.
very
The
specific
Yeah.
intention.
energy science techniques. And
Yeah.
so it's not that I didn't believe in the work or didn't think it would work, but
Right.
I didn't have expectations for someone who got 2 years of learning in like a quick crash course to affect such a physical change on like her first tries. It was
Yeah.
awesome,
Which
awesome.
which
Yes.
just shows what an amazing teacher you are.
Oh, nice.
I'm just parroting what Barbara taught the people who taught me. So we're
Oh,
all just passing it around, and I think it's universal truth on some level. So I'm
Yeah.
happy
yeah.
that works for him.
Absolutely. But it's amazing, and I can't really take credit for it, like, I'm just the conduit, right?
Right.
I don't feel like
Yeah.
it's me or anything special that I do or specific that I do.
Yeah.
It's
Anybody
just,
can learn this stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
So now let's jump into some of Katie's snap stories and how they affected our lives. If you want to say anything about snaps to kick this off, feel free.
Yeah. So when I started the psychic stuff, you get a message and you're like, "Oh, did I make that up? Is that a real message?" And they tell you just write everything down. Write everything, everything, everything down. Don't question it. Don't interpret it. Just write it down. So, like when you're doing readings for someone else, and I experienced this with you guys, when you're doing readings with someone else, you write some things down and they don't mean anything to the person doing the reading, right? And you
Mhm.
Yeah.
repeat it back to the people that you're doing the reading for, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I know what that is." Which is why you're not supposed to question it. You're not supposed to, just present what you get, kind of thing.
Gotcha.
But
Mhm.
sometimes when I was doing the psychic stuff, there was I know this is a message. Like, I know this is it. And you have that high level of confidence that it is what it is. Or I know you guys are way more into the numbers than I am. I don't notice numbers in the same way that you do. Sometimes you talk about like synchronicities or getting things multiple times or things like that. So if you see the number 5 like 26 times in one day, like, yeah, that's a message for you, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes I'll get a message and I don't need to see it 26 times. Like, I just know the initial time that that's what it is. And that's what I call a snap, is that knowing that whatever message came through it's a message and it is what it is.
I know what you mean, though. There's like a feeling to it.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is a message. You feel that intuitive prompting, whatever it is in you
Yeah.
that you just know.
You know it.
So,
Yeah.
in one of our episodes, we talked about the clairs or HSP or psychic senses, and one of them is direct knowing. And I think
Yeah.
that's a lot of what's going on.
Yeah. So I do experience that direct knowing, but also the snaps can come in different ways. So like I said, I'm a very visual person, so sometimes I see it, but I know it at the same time. And this kind of goes, I don't know. I feel like people separate stuff out all the time. Like sometimes people are like, "How did you get that message?" And I'm like, "I don't know." sometimes I see it, sometimes I know it, sometimes I see and know it, sometimes I feel like I don't know if I heard it or saw it or, did I don't know. Just you get them.
I think there's overlap. Like you're kind of saying, like you can see something and know at the same time. And in school, we
Right.
were always encouraged to use two of our senses at least for whatever we're sensing. But I know Barbara would like to check in with all five. If she got a message, she'd check in on all the levels and validate it or get more
Yeah.
information that way. So they all go hand in hand and overlap.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, so this story is Katie's snaps for us involving goldenrod and corn silk.
So I am new to herbalism and I didn't know too much about the herbs, but they came through that I should tell Brandon that he should use goldenrod and corn silk. And I remember with goldenrod, I didn't really know what it was, but when I got the snap for it, I was looking around everywhere and there were these big, like vast fields of gold out there. And I was like, I think that's goldenrod. So then I started doing research on it and it was in fact goldenrod. So we literally
Wow.
pulled the car over to the side of the road and I harvested a little bit. Not a lot. I didn't want to keep it from coming back or anything like that. Just a couple stalks for personal use. And then I started noticing it all over around my house. So I started harvesting some from my house. But I didn't know what it did. I had to actually go look it up. And I remember corn silk even more so because corn silk is the stringy stuff that's in the corn. And I was like, you can use that for something? What is going on?
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
I had no
Yeah.
idea at the time, and I remember shortly after, you gave me the snap. I don't question your snaps, so I ordered some corn silk, and you hit me up, and you're like, I just thought about how medical medium says to not have corn, and I'm
Yeah.
positive that it was a snap, but I just want to tell you because I know you're all in a medical medium, and I'd feel bad
Yeah.
if I didn't say something. And I was like, don't worry, I know, and I've heard from the medical medium community that medical medium has said if corn wasn't all GMO, it could actually be a healing food. But most corn these days is GMO. And so I was able to find some corn silk that comes from some other country and it's certified GMO free and all this other stuff. It's
Oh,
top notch. And I bought like a 2 pound bag of it. So it should last me a very long time.
yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. So I also got these herbs, not corn silk, but goldenrod for me. And I do get a lot of snaps for myself too. And I go look them up and all I can do is laugh when I read what the energetics of the herbs are and what parts of the body they have affinities with and how it can affect your body, like what kind of actions it will take or, how the herb will work with you in certain ways. All I can do is laugh because it's not anything that I know yet. It's just things that I want to be able to do it the other way around. I want to say, oh, I have this problem. It presents itself in this way. This would be a good herb to apply to it. But right now, all I can do is, oh, I get the snap and then go look it up and say, oh, yes, that makes sense.
Well, talk about validation. I think that's a
Yeah.
great form of validation.
Yeah. Definitely a good way of trusting
Yeah.
yourself.
One that I enjoy for myself when it happens too.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. And I think I had similar snaps for Sophia too, where, I just randomly send her, these herbs would
Yes.
be good for you. And
Yes.
then have to go look them up as well.
And we're very lucky. A lot of them grow wild around here too. So it's been
Yeah.
really synchronistic. One of the snaps you had, we were foraging for that particular thing, and then you had a snap about it. So should we
Yeah.
go into that one?
Well, there's a few about that. So one of the first ones is yarrow. And
Mm.
so you just had a simple snap like Brandon, drink yarrow tea. And yarrow is something we have all around our yard.
Mhm.
Very lucky. It's very plentiful here. And so we try to stock up and it lasts throughout the winter. And I listened for, I forget how long, a week or two, and then kind of lost the discipline of having yarrow. And you had told me have yarrow every day. You made that clear in your snap, but nonetheless, I kind of forgot. And then Sophia got a snap and she said, Brandon, I got a snap for you. You need to drink more yarrow. I was like, okay. So I started drinking more yarrow again.
And you do it as a tea, right?
Yeah,
Yarrow tea.
I put it as a tea. And then not too long after that, we did one of the 9-day medical medium cleanses, and we actually did 2 in a row. So we went for 18 days, and you can have tea on the cleanses, but I decided not to for whatever reason. So I stopped once again, and I literally woke up like just barely out of the sleeping state. And I hear my guides like yelling at me, like, drink more yarrow tea. And I was like startled by it. I was like, okay, like I
Listen here,
got
boy.
it. Yeah. And that was maybe a month ago. And I've had yarrow almost every day since. So,
Wow.
any of us can be stubborn following the guidance, but it all started with Katie's snap and built off of that. So I'm thankful to have the other validation to go along with
I love when the guides get loud. It's like, oh, okay, all right. I was listening. I'm listening now.
it. Yeah. So another one of your snaps that we foraged was elderberry.
Yes. And it was
And
Oh, nice.
elderflower. And was it
there's elderflower.
Any
elderflower?
of the
Yes.
elders, they're all good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I remember what happened with that one is we were going up into the forest and checking like, are the berries yet ready yet? Are the berries ready yet?
Mhm.
The strawberries, the blueberries, and they weren't. And so we're like, oh man, it's early season. It's not yet forage time, even though we were really excited for it. And Katie got a snap to have elderflower. And we're like, oh, that usually comes around this time of year. And we went up that day, and the elderflowers were in full bloom. And I couldn't believe it. I
Mhm.
was like, the timing of her snap is like perfect with the nature around us right now.
Yeah, and that's something we
Perfect.
foraged in past years, but it was just kind of like forgotten that year for some reason.
Yeah.
Like,
Just get too excited about the berries.
yeah, that's true. All right, let's jump into the hawthorn berry hibiscus snap that you got from me, Katie. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I don't actually remember most of these. When I get snaps for you guys, I try to write them to you as fast as possible because I know a couple times I've gotten snaps for you and I'm like, oh, I have to put something with that. Like there's some explanation or something that's needed. And then I forget to write to you and then it goes a little while and I can't remember it anyway, which is terrible. So I try to get you the snaps as fast as possible. And then if I can remember later, whatever other information that goes along with it, which I think is interesting that we were talking earlier about they teach you when you're doing psychic readings and that kind of stuff is to just write it down and let the people know and they'll figure it out. It's not for you to
Mhm.
interpret. So I have to remember that with all aspects of of life really, I guess. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I mean, I can tell it because I was involved in the receiving of the information. Sophia was sleeping, and I was just laying in bed playing on my phone. And I get a message from Katie, and it says, I'm watching a movie with my husband right now, and I
Mhm.
keep falling asleep. And the first time I fell asleep, they said that Sophia needs hibiscus tea. And then the second time I fell asleep, they said she needs hawthorn berry tea or just hawthorn berries. And then you said, I have no idea what hawthorn berries
Yeah.
are or what they do or what they're good for, but I definitely got that. And for me, when someone says something like that, it gives me more trust in the message. It's not like, oh, she just had her herbalism class or something and just learned about this. It's like completely out of the blue. And so again, Sophia's sleeping. And so I go on Amazon and I just decided to put hawthorn berry in. And the first thing I see is a traditional medicinal tea that was hawthorn
Mm,
berry hibiscus blend. And I was like, no way.
awesome.
They already make the blend that we need for this. So
Yeah, super synchronistic. And like when we looked up hawthorn berry and the hibiscus, it goes right along with all the health conditions that I'm faced with. So it makes perfect sense. And I had never heard of hawthorn berries before. And guess what? Our grocery store that we shop at here, it's a little holistic store, has them. And so it was all just
Perfect.
like it fell into place. Yeah.
mhm, mhm.
Perfect. I love that. That's how so many of mine go where I get a snap and I go look it up and I'm like, oh, that makes sense.
It's always awesome when medical medium has something to say about it too. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know,
Uh,
so.
yeah.
So this next snap is a snap about cranberries. When I had gotten sick again. Definitely not anywhere near as sick as I had been in times I used to talk about, in stories that I tell from years ago. But I got sick and I had a kidney infection going on, and the snap was for cranberries. And you might be able to say, oh, yeah, duh, like cranberries, kidney infections. But let me just say, when you're super sick, your whole world is like, wow, 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 like just disharmonic, and you can't think clearly,
Mm.
at least for me. And I've heard that before from others. But Katie came through and she was like, my guys are saying you need cranberries. And so I started having cranberries. And then she's like, you need to have more cranberries. And then a few days later, I was like, yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. Like I've bounced back like in a short few days. I'm good. And they're like, they're telling me that just because you feel good doesn't mean you could stop the cranberries. You need to keep having cranberries. And so we were traveling to California at the time. And a few days later, it was like a week after, I had initially gotten sick. And so we're in the airport and we need a meal before we get on the flight. And there was a salad there that had cranberries on it. So I was like, okay, well, that's following guidance. It's a good choice. I ate my salad, had my cranberries for the day, just a small little handful. And we get on the plane, we're mid flight, and Sophia looks over at me. She's like, I just got a snap for you that you need more cranberries. And I was like, okay, noted. And then probably like 30, 45 minutes later, the passenger in front of me drops a bag of cranberries between the seat and the side of the plane, and it lands at my feet. And I was literally like, okay, universe, you just dropped a bag of cranberries at my feet.
Oh.
I got it. I hear you. And so got to California, and I think it's like Lakewood Farms makes a 100% pure cranberry juice, not from
Yep,
concentrate. And I got one of those for every single day that I
Mm.
was traveling just to be safe, and drank one every day.
perfect.
And I don't have one every day, but I still drink that every single day. Um,
Perfect.
because Katie hasn't gotten a snap for me to stop yet. So I'm still going.
I'll let you know when you can.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
I mean,
I think I think it's
not,
good for so much else too. So, it's
yeah,
not like
I was gonna say not a snap, but cranberries are like one of my favorite foods ever. I
Send
think
you some
everybody
kiss.
should be eating cranberries all the time. They're amazing.
they
Mhm.
are,
But that
yeah.
wasn't why I got the snap for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I attribute it with like saving my life. I
Literally with
turned
keeping,
around
yeah.
super fast, and then I'm like traveling, which initially I wasn't sure I was going on that trip anymore, but rapid turnaround. So very,
Yeah.
very thankful. And, that just goes to show what these snaps mean to me.
Yeah, definitely. And
Yep.
I think the fact that it's like a live food, it's a pure cranberry
Yes,
juice is the other thing. It's not like he's taking a powdered or a pill or something like that. This is
correct.
potent medicine. And when you taste that Lakewood cranberry juice, if you're not used to it, it's very like puckering.
Astringent. Yeah,
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's got some potent medicine in there.
it definitely is. So one thing I just want to point out, because I know you guys do medical medium and your listeners probably already know this, but I think one of the powerful things with medical medium is he goes through so much with having live food.
Mhm.
Taking a pill is not the same thing at all.
Definitely.
And
Yeah.
I think that's very related to this whole podcast and everything. Like you are working with the energetics of the world. So it makes sense that something that is live and has its own energy and this and that is going to bring you more vitality than something that has been deconstructed and boiled
Yeah.
down and pulled out, and you cannot get the same stuff from a pill. It's just never going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that you follow medical medium. And so around that time when I fell ill with the cranberry story, you actually gave me a whole protocol, and it
Mhm.
was all based on snaps. And one of the things that sticks out to me in my memory is with the cherries, you said don't have too much every day. And I
uh,
just trusted that as a snap of yours. And then later I was reading some medical medium, and he says the same thing, not to go too hard on the cherries. And
mm,
so I don't know if you just knew that from what he said or if your snap was right on, but it's
I don't
perfect
even
for me
remember it.
because okay. Yeah, it's just totally in alignment. And it's perfect for me because when I get healing advice, I go all in, and I can't tell
Yeah.
you how many times that's been a mistake.
Yeah.
Too
Yeah.
much of a good thing is too much. So
Yep.
yeah, again,
Well,
that was awesome to have a personalized protocol from you.
Mhm.
yeah. Well, it wasn't from me. You just got it through me.
Yeah,
Yeah, from
same,
spirit.
same.
Yeah.
I do think I relate to that so hard because I think a lot of people, me included, are, oh, if that's a good thing, then more is better, right? Which is not the case usually. And I have to always remind myself that the dose makes the poison, right? Like some things that are
Yeah,
good for you in small amounts can actually be poisonous in large amounts. And
it's
so
a
you
good
kind of
point.
have to be mindful of what you're doing. So I do try to remind myself when I hear about something that's good, I always try to say the phrase, the dose makes the poison, so that I don't
Mm.
jump in so much with, oh, if 1 tablespoon is good, then a cup and a half is better.
Yes.
Well, I've never heard that. I'm gonna let that be one of my mantras in the kitchen because I could probably
Okay.
do a whole episode about
Overdoing it.
overdoing it. So
You and me both.
yeah. So next up is speaking of Rossi, who just, he's going to be in the background sometimes with noises or on video.
Yeah, he's
Now
a
that we're
little
doing
baby.
a video podcast, you might see us looking down. That's what's down there. This is Rossi.
It's our dog.
Yeah. So Katie's also gotten snaps for Rossi. So let's talk about those a little bit.
Okay.
So the snaps that Katie got were real simple. You just got seaweed and pumpkin seeds, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I didn't remember the seaweed. I did remember the pumpkin seeds because you went and looked it up on Medical Medium and sent it to me, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I need pumpkin seeds too."
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and it was super synchronistic because I give him sardines about once a week as a source of vitamin E, and lentils have some vitamin E, so those are also in his diet. But the pumpkin seeds, the first thing that struck me is their level of vitamin E was really through the roof, and then also the other vitamins in them. And that's the
Yeah.
thing with the homemade diet is you're sourcing everything you give the animal to eat is coming from a fruit, a vegetable, some kind of plant. So, it's not like you buy a food for the dog and it's got all the vitamins in there.
Mm.
You really have to be mindful of, are you giving a complete diet with what you're making in your kitchen at home, and giving those through vital life force energy sources that are alive.
Right. That's true, but on the other hand, just because you're buying a dog food diet that has all those vitamins in there doesn't mean that it's bioavailable to the dog, right? It doesn't mean that it's
Oh,
good
yeah.
for them or
No, this is something I'm super passionate about, and the bioavailability is huge, and we want to feed ourselves food that has vital life force energy, and that's how we
right.
stay healthy. And the same is for the animals. I mean, animals in nature don't walk around and get their food out of a bag. They're alive
Yeah.
because they're eating things that are alive. And so just to remember that in this modern day and age, and I know not all of us have time to make our pets their homemade dog food, but just being mindful of those kind of things. Maybe you can add something to the diet that helps give them those bioavailable vitamins and vital life
Right.
force energy. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I like to call
Absolutely.
out numbers when I see them, and I just looked over at Sophia's computer. It's January 3rd at 3:33 p.m. right now. But
Really?
uh,
That's
moving
a lot
on,
of threes.
moving on from that, back to what we were talking about. Are you giving Rossi Atlantic Dulse now?
Yes, now I'm giving, since Katie's snap, I'm giving Rossi Atlantic Dulse, and I was giving him sea meal before, which is something Medical Medium has on his website.
So Katie got the snap, and Sophia's like, seaweed. Well, I'm already giving him sea meal, and I go, do not question
Yes,
Katie's
he did.
Katie's snaps.
Yeah.
The sea meal's not cutting it. So let's add some dulse or maybe some other seaweed that we find. So
Well,
So
yeah.
not to complicate things, but the word bladder rack just came in right now. I don't know if that's a seaweed or not.
bladder rack. Okay, a live
No.
snap on the recording of this episode. Nice.
Uh,
That's awesome.
And that would be for Rossi, is what you're saying?
yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. When we were
Okay,
talking
cool.
about seaweed for him, that's what came to mind.
Okay, sweet.
For what it's worth.
So, yeah, right.
I'm like dying to look up bladder rack now.
We can do that if you
I
want.
mean, yeah, I have no
I'm going,
objection to that.
I'm looking super fast.
Okay.
So bladderwrack is in fact a seaweed.
Oh, wow.
Wait, and you didn't know that?
No.
Okay, so Katie decided to look up bladder which none of us had any idea what that is. I've never heard of it.
No, me neither.
And it turns out it is a seaweed.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now I'm trying to find an herbal source that I trust for like what kind of things it's used for. Anyway, I'll have to tell you guys later, but
It's used for dog health, apparently.
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 Wow, that is amazing.
Okay, so this next snap was a snap Katie shared with us after listening to one of our audio messages that we put out to our Patreon members. And I'll let Katie describe it.
Sure. I got this huge sense of belonging and balance, and that Brandon and Sophia really balance each other out. Not that they're not individually balanced, but that depending on where they are in their lives, that the other one is providing that counterweight. So just because Brandon used it as an example earlier, if he finds that a little bit is good, that he tends to go with a lot is better. Sophia's kind of there to temper that and make it good. And I think having had a healing from Brandon individually and then having had healings from both of them together, I think that individually they're amazing people, but together it's like this coalescing of natural powers to build this like uber thing. It's I think in there I said something about like wonder twin powers activate or something, that I see them as like a yin and yang together, or like it just together, that it's like infinitely bigger than them individually. Yeah,
Oh, thank
it's
you
you
so
guys are
much.
amazing.
That's very encouraging, and I love hearing that. So I'm
Thank
really glad that
you.
you got that as a snap because I trust your snaps and that you shared it with us. So
Thank you so much. Yeah, it feels so
Yeah,
good. Thank you for that. And I feel like it helps us see each other just like in a really humble way. So I really
yeah,
appreciate you telling us that.
yeah,
and it resonates because we're very different and
Thank you.
we do I feel that.
I feel like we bring balance to each other's lives. Yeah, I definitely think
yeah,
being so drastically different in personality is like a complementary thing in this
yeah.
relationship. Yeah, so thanks for seeing
It's
that. Yeah.
it's hard to explain though, because I feel like people don't really understand the opposite so much, because like if I go through and I say like Sophia's heart is so big and she's so kind and so feeling, then it makes it sound like Brandon isn't, and that's not true at all. Brandon's heart is huge and he's so kind and right, but that's one thing that I see as a balance, like more, it can't be all love. There has to be some practicality there. And it's not that Brandon's unfeeling at all. He's not. He's like so full of love. But I see that as like one of the balance points. And
Yeah.
it's really hard to explain, because I do think that individually you guys are balanced, but I also think that you need to be together, because it's like such a, like I said, like a yin and yang, like such a, you fit together and create the whole.
That's so cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much for
Yeah,
sharing that.
like
Yeah.
receiving that humbly and with an open heart. Thank you.
And I just want to say that we put out weekly oracle offerings on our Patreon, and Sophia was told this in a dream maybe a few weeks back, and we put it out as it's one of our oracles. This was after your snap, but it was that telling our stories individually is one thing, but telling them together has a different effect on the world. And so this is a message that keeps coming to us in different ways, and just strengthening the co-creative bond
Yeah.
that we've committed to in this lifetime. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also want to say to any listeners, this is take 2 on this segment of the podcast because Rossi was really annoying chewing his bone on the chairs the first time, and somehow the second time around he got way louder and started hacking up along. So if you heard anyone go, it's because not because they were trying to downplay our love for each other, but because he was choking on his bone. So-
So we took it away from him. Yeah. He's not to be trusted. He has to be told no eating when, he's doing things he shouldn't be doing there.
That's
Little
okay.
man. Funny too.
I feel like that's such a kid thing. Oh, mom and dad are showing love.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
He's
Yep.
just jealous. Okay, next up, do you want to talk about your raccoon and 3 sets of turkeys and that one?
I just thought it was funny because I saw all these animals on the way there, and then the raccoon was the one that stuck in my mind. And I think it's kind of a good example of a snap where I can see a bunch of animals, but I know the one I'm supposed to pay attention to, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Brandon actually is the one who got me into animals as a significant sign of things, because I read your book and you were talking about spirit guides and that kind of thing. And then I think the week after I read your book, I got all these animal signs, which was funny. And I had to keep bothering you to look them up in your book and tell me what they meant. And yeah, so I got the sign for the raccoon and I came home and I looked it up and it said, wearing a mask and not being your true self and whatever that is. And it was interesting because I think that was the third time that week that I had gotten the message about a mask. But I get these snaps and I don't always know what to make of them. Like, okay, I'm wearing a mask. I'm not being my true self. What am I supposed to do about it? How do I use the message? Sometimes I don't know what to do with them. So it's tough.
A journey of a lifetime.
Yeah,
Yep.
That's how I
definitely.
feel about it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like feeling into it and seeing like how it applies to a particular situation. But yeah, it's definitely taking those steps, and those steps can be challenging to fix
Yeah.
them. Being aware is the first step.
Yeah. Yep. I feel like this whole podcast makes me sound like I know what I'm doing or that I have a great amount of experience with this, or like all of this is very new to me and anyone can do this, right? If you told me that I was doing this 6 months ago, I'd be like, haha, you're funny, you know.
I want to speak up for the people who are more like me and they're listening to this right now and they're like, I've been aware of this stuff for a long time and I can't make it happen on the level you guys are talking about. That's been kind of my experience. And so there was many, many years of my life where I read all the books. I knew this stuff was possible, but it wasn't happening for me. And it took me a lot longer time to really get in tune with, I guess I'd say, my abilities, or my higher sense perception is a good way to put it. But for Katie, yeah, I think it happened relatively quick.
So I have to say a couple things to that.
Okay.
One, I think you have to find your niche. So in the beginning, you were naming all the things I did, and you said crystals. And when you said crystals, I was like, I have some crystals. That is not my mode. I have tried to work with them and not a lot happens for me. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I want this or I want that. Mostly when I'm doing a healing with you guys, I'll be like, oh, I need these 3 crystals or something like that. But that's like the extent of my crystal thing. I don't even know what they're called. I don't know what they're supposed to do. I know nothing about them. Tarot is good for me because I'm such a visual person. I have a specific deck that I like, and that is really the only deck that I can use appropriately. I took a tarot class and they said that you had to use the Rider-Waite deck in class. And that class was so hard for me. I did not see one thing that I was supposed to see. I feel like I do a decent job with my tarot readings if I do them my way. I can't do a tarot reading any other way. That's just not my niche, I guess. And same thing with like the Reiki versus the Brennan healing science. Like I did the Reiki class for that was like a couple weeks and learn and practice and this and that. And then I spent 30 minutes with you on the Brennan healing science, and that like blew my mind. Like that was so much more than the entire Reiki class together. I think if you're interested in doing this and you're not having success, it might be because you're trying to do it with something that doesn't work for you. Like the angel board did not work for me at all. The pendulum does work for me. The tarot cards do work for me. You have to kind of find what works for you. In my psychic class and in a couple different podcasts I've listened to, they're kind of like know what the clairs are and identify them. I do think that that's part of it. Like, I know I'm a very visual person, so a lot of my snaps or my information comes from visual means, which is why this one tarot deck works for me. It is beautifully illustrated. There's a lot of colors. There's tons of stuff going on. So when I look at that deck, I can pick out things that have meaning for me, right?
Mhm.
So if you're an auditory person, song lyrics or writing might work better for you. It's nice if you can kind of identify what type of person you are and sort of match different psychic things to that. Like Brandon, I think you're more auditory because you hear song lyrics, and the angel board works, which is like words and messages. Like words are
It's
hard
like
for me.
it's like kinesthetic is what that is. It's like
Yeah.
moving my physical hands, like kinesthetic felt sense.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think we all have something we click to naturally, and that's kind of what you're referring to now, but also that very organically and slowly a bunch more than what you notice at first starts to open up for you.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
like with the angel board in particular, I just want to say that it didn't work for me for 5 years. After it was proven to me that it works, I returned to it periodically over 5 years before it clicked and I got it.
Yeah,
So,
that's
and a
dedication.
lot happened with during the 4 years of school and it's continuing to this day. So
Yeah.
Yes, I think mine is a combination of abilities. I feel like I have the direct knowing a lot. I feel like
Hmm.
able to communicate with my guides early morning in between dream and awake very
Mm.
lucidly. That's probably my strongest. I don't know if we want to call it a gift or ability. All the clairs happen at different times for me. So, yeah, just seeing what presents. And I'm really a feeling person, big
Mm.
on feelings. So, for me, it's a feeling that I have usually
Mm.
that I can trust.
I can see that. I want to just comment on your early morning between sleeping and awake. I find that if I set an alarm and go back to sleep for like a half an hour or an hour, I get a ton in that time period. If I purposefully wake myself up to have a little bit more time in bed where I can be like sort of sleeping in that half awake time, I get a ton of information then.
Awesome. Yeah. And I mean, write it down because that's like gold for me at
Yeah.
least.
it's where like 99% of your stuff comes through.
That's where
Yeah.
99%, yeah, of guidance, oracles comes through. And it's, I was told by my guides that the fax line has to be open for them to transmit messages and us to receive them. And so that time in the morning before we've busied our minds with, thoughts of the day, what we have to do, all those kinds of things, that was their analogy to me is they could get through the messages because the fax line wasn't busy. It's
Mm,
open and it's clear. So I thought that was a really great analogy. It makes sense.
that is good. You guys get a ton of stuff through dreams. I don't remember them that well. And the funny thing is, I know, so Brandon has been kind enough to interpret some of my dreams for me. And it's funny because I went back and read some of those later, and I'm very grateful for those interpretations, but I don't even remember the dreams now.
Ah,
Yeah, that's why
So,
writing them down is so important.
yeah, definitely writing it
yeah,
all down. I want to add to like creative writing, intuitive writing, all that goes hand in hand with like channeling. And writing it down is a great way to be able to go back and look at what you wrote at this time in your life, what was going on.
yeah,
But also like to remind ourselves because as the day goes on, we do forget. Like, I did some intuitive writing this morning and I can kind of go back a little bit and think what the main messages for the day was. But then to go back and read it is like the whole download again. So I just think
mm-hmm.
there's so much value to recording it, writing it down.
Whole different frequency, that dream stuff.
Yeah.
So for our soulful send off, is there anything else that any of us feel called from our soul, our heart space to put into the end of this episode that we want to highlight and let the listeners notice? And I'll just re-highlight. I'll start off real quick that the bladder, what was it?
Bladder rack.
Bladder rack. I mean, the fact that that just came in the middle of recording this episode and none of us know what it is, my mind is blown.
Yeah,
So
totally.
that's my favorite thing to my number one thing I want to re-highlight here in the soulful send-off, just real-time snaps
Yes.
coming through, and now our dog's going to be much better off because of it. And
Yeah.
I hope so.
yeah, so
I don't know if it's a soulful send off, but mine is very personal. I am so grateful that the universe brought us together because you guys have changed my life in so many amazing ways. I mean, even if it was just a friendship, that would be an amazing, gratifying, fulfilling friendship. But I have learned so much from you both. And I just feel like the universe finds a way to bring things into your life that you need. And I
Mhm.
think that that is true for everyone. And part of that is intention. So if you have the intention to do something with your life or to have this goodness in your life, put the intention out there and the universe will deliver. But you have to believe your intention. You can't half-heartedly intend for it to happen and then say, oh, the universe isn't going to do it, because then it won't.
right.
But
Right. The doubt.
but
Yeah.
yeah, but I'm so grateful because I don't think that I knew that I needed you both, and I definitely do. So I'm very grateful that the
Oh,
universe has
oh, I
made
know,
this
right?
Well,
happen.
thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Katie.
Back at you.
Love you. Oh.
Uh,
For my part of the soulful send off, I would say that it's super important to share with people that what you're getting, psychically, or if you feel like you just have messages for people that are coming in, because people are always looking to change their lives for the better, whether they are going to, admit that or come up and tell you that. Everyone wants to release their suffering, release their pain, physically, emotionally, whatever it may be. And just to have that love and support and that connection from each other is priceless. The journey isn't fun if you do it alone. It gets more fun if you have your companions by your side, and just the support means so much to people and changes everyone's life in a positive way. So I would just encourage everyone out there to not be shy if you feel like you're getting psychic hits for people or intuitive messages, to share them. And they can throw them out the window if they don't like them and don't have to use them, but at least you're giving them that opportunity to take that in and do something better with their lives and heal themselves.
yeah, and you touched on it a little bit. You're saying fun, but also the support. It feels much more safe to have somebody who's on your wavelength, who you can bounce ideas back and forth with, and gain support in general. But in the case of Katie's psychic snaps here, like, I consider them life saving,
Yes.
and really adds an element of safety for me in this lifetime. And building on the gratitude that you both have already expressed, like, I appreciate everything you said about Sophia and I, being teachers and this and that. And thank you for sharing that. But I want to just say that your relationship with us has been a key component in stepping into
Yeah.
that, because when I had to do a homework assignment and reach out to somebody I didn't know, like, just that directive alone made me like super scared. And I found you on the internet, and then I was fearful, like, oh my God, I'm meeting someone doing this, someone I don't know. And you've just been like excellent, like perfect for helping me like blossom into my healership and my higher sense perceptions. And just, I mean, that's just the beginning, and it's been a journey over the years, and so much more has come from that point. And so you really touch our lives, and
Thank you.
a huge support system and growth factor and all that. So
Oh,
thank you, and
thank
we love
you.
you.
Love you.
Okay, well, with all the love and gratitude, thank you for
Yes.
showing up
Yes.
here on this
Eh,
Aspen Roots podcast and
Mhm.
sharing your stories with the world. And
Yes.
Oh my
um,
gosh. Thank you for
yeah,
inviting me. I'm so honored.
Oh, it's been really fun too.
Yes,
yes,
it
it
Yeah.
has.
has.
Our,
So,
our
Yeah.
first guest, our first video podcast. So let's
Oh,
look forward to more to come,
keep them
and
rolling.
yeah,
yeah.
keep on journeying on.
Sounds good. I just have to tell you guys one thing. Towards the end, I started seeing an aura around each one of you, which does not happen to me very often at all. So that was super exciting.
Nice. What did it
Awesome.
look like? What color was mine?
Was it color or was
Um,
it just like the film?
it's kind of a glow. Both of them are kind of like, I want to say goldy, but also like blue a bit. And yeah, and they just go out. Sophia's is more like around her face and stuff. So I'm wondering if it's the hat, because Sophia's is more like here and around, and Brandon is more up higher. So I don't know if it's the hat or
He
like
is more
down.
grounded and I'm up here.
Oh yeah, maybe.
I need to ground.
So, but as soon as it starts to get busy, and then I sort of lose it. So like like around the mid section where I can see stuff in the background from you guys, then I don't see it as much.
The plain background helps.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
plain background helps. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
anyway,
That's
that was super exciting that I see, because
Cool.
I've only seen auras a couple times.
Nice.
that's
Yeah.
That's
awesome.
awesome to hear.
Yeah.
Oh,
That
I
was
love
it.
it. Every week, we share our most recent divine guidance in an audio recording called Oracle Offerings. Sign up for only $5 a month at patreon.com/Aspen Roots.